Hey there guys, this is Richard, your host, with another marvelous video. Throughout the comic stories, Magneto's character oscillates between villain and anti-hero, and he's almost always driven by a deep-seated belief in mutant superiority, which is actually the result of a tragic past. His complex relationship with Charles Xavier, his amazing powers and intellect, and his unyielding commitment to mutant kind make him one of the most compelling characters in the X-Men saga. Truly a gem of the Marvel Universe, it only makes sense that we dedicate our time to understanding the Master of Magnetism's entire story as described in the comics. So, without further ado, let's begin. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. A child born in prejudice and injustice. Eric Magnus Linder, or the formidable Magneto, was born as Max Eisenhardt into a middle-class Jewish family in Nuremberg, Germany. As one would, or rather should expect, Max's early life was anything but easy from the very beginning. As a kid, he was smitten with Magda, a young Romany girl whose mom worked at his school. As a child, all Max wanted was to impress her. He'd make her necklaces, show off in sports, typical young love stuff. But the child in this kid died when he stumbled upon a Nazi rally and saw his uncle Eric beaten down for his relationship with a non-Jewish woman. From that moment onward, Max's life got even rougher at school. He won a javelin competition, trying to catch Magda's eye, but got slammed with cheating accusations because the idea of a Jewish kid outperforming his so-called Aryan classmates just didn't fly. Forced to prove himself with a standard javelin, Max nailed it again, but only ended up expelled and beaten up by his peers. This brutal reality of prejudice and injustice shaped Max's early years and truly sowed the seed for the powerful, determined mutant he'd become. On the run, Max Eisenhardt's dad, Jacob, a veteran of World War I, couldn't wrap his head around the fact that Germany, the country he'd fought for, was now turning against its own. Hoping for some support, Jacob took Max to meet Major Jürgen Schaff, a guy he'd saved during the war. But the visit turned sour. While waiting for the Major, Jacob was brutally beaten by Nazis on the accusation that he was causing trouble and resisting arrest. Major Schaff eventually intervened and threw Jacob out of his office, before claiming that he was saving Jacob from a certain death. The guy went on to tell Jacob that they were now even. As the situation in Germany deteriorated, Jacob was forced to face the truth. Jews were not safe any longer. He moved the family to Warsaw, Poland, after the horrors of Kristallnacht, or the Crystal Night, which was a pogrom against Jews by the Nazi parties, Sturmabteilung paramilitary and Schutzstaffel paramilitary forces. But even in Poland, safety was a fleeting dream. When Warsaw fell under Nazi control, Max's family ended up in the Jewish section, which soon became the notorious Warsaw Ghetto. By October 1940, the Nazis had walled them in. To keep his family afloat, Max turned to smuggling. But in July 1942, as the Nazis began rounding up people for the Treblinka extermination camp, Max and his family made a break for it. They almost made it to safety, but Nazi soldiers caught them. In a heart-wrenching moment, as they faced execution, Jacob saved Max by pushing him out of the line of fire without anyone noticing. Tragically, Jacob and the rest of Max's family were killed and buried in a mass grave, with Max mistakenly thought to be among the dead. This experience became a defining moment in Max's life, and also the first instance of extreme stress and duress, because of which his mutant abilities began to manifest. So, he lost his family, but he was finding his powers. Finding love. In his teen years, Max Eisenhardt found himself captive in Auschwitz, which we know was one of the most notorious extermination camps in all of Nazi Germany. His early teens were marred by the horrors of World War II and the grim reality of the Holocaust. In 1944, amidst the despair of Auschwitz, Max crossed paths with the infamous Mr. Sinister and the geneticist Joseph Mengele. Trusting his gut, Max steered clear of Mengele, fearing his experiments where he transplanted mutant organs in innocent children. So, to save himself from all that, Max became a Sonderkommando, people whose job was to clean the camp's crematoria. It was this horrific job that led him to the remains of his friends, who had fallen victim to Mengele's monstrous experiments. Surviving the Holocaust as the only member of his family, Max experienced the depths of human cruelty, and how harshly they could treat beings they didn't really understand. All of his experiences until now etched a permanent mark on his psyche, and shaped his views on humanity and difference. What added to his long list of struggles was the fact that Max couldn't tap into his mutant powers during this time due to a hepatitis infection. Eventually, Max was reunited with Magda, his childhood crush, while in Auschwitz. He'd smuggle food and supplies to her, and he even saved her from the gas chambers and later from execution. During the Sonderkommando revolt, they escaped together. The pair found some peace in a Carpathian mountain village where they lived for several years. There, Max and Magda's bond deepened, and they eventually married. The couple was blessed with a daughter, Anya, which was the beginning of a brief period of peace in Max's tumultuous life. nothing is permanent. Max was essentially a city kid, and the slow rural life was not really his thing. He always sought more from life, or at least a fast-paced one. So Max Eisenhardt left the quiet mountain village with his family for the Soviet city of Vinnytsia. It was here, driven by a desire to improve his lot, that Max first consciously tapped into his mutant powers. In fact, he used his magnetic abilities for the first time to fling a crowbar at his boss for shortchanging him. But this newfound power came with a series of events he could never really forget. On their first day in Vinnytsia, Max returned to their inn to find it ablaze, with his daughter Anya trapped inside. Desperate to save her, he tried to use his powers, but his efforts were thwarted by the KGB, who had been called in by his enraged boss. They brought the poor man down with force, which in turn forbade him from saving his young child, who perished in the flames. In a fit of rage and grief, Max unleashed his powers in full force and killed the men restraining him. In fact, he caused widespread destruction in Vinnytsia. This unfortunate and catastrophic show of his abilities terrified his wife, Magda, who fled in horror. Interestingly, she was unaware that she was pregnant with twins. As Max attempted to bury Anya, more soldiers arrived, of course, hearing of his destructive retaliation. In the ensuing confrontation, he was shot in the head but survived and used his powers to turn the soldiers' weapons against themselves, becoming Eric Magnus Lenscher. After the heartbreak and turmoil in Vinnytsia, Max Eisenhardt knew he needed a fresh start, and how could he now? I mean, he was under the radar big time. He tracked down George Oderkirk, a forger who gave him a new identity of Eric Lenscher, that of a Sinti Romani Holocaust survivor. He added Magnus as his middle name, and thereby began a new chapter in his life as Eric Magnus Lenscher. This new identity was a cover as he tried to find Magda among her people, but unbeknownst to him, she'd already died in Transia. As Eric Magnus, he found his way to Haifa, Israel, where he volunteered at a psychiatric hospital for Holocaust victims. It was here, in an environment heavy with the past's shadows, that Eric crossed paths with Charles Xavier. The two struck up a friendship and often dove into deep discussions about the future of mutants and humanity. Neither disclosed their mutant abilities initially, with Xavier the optimist about peaceful coexistence, and Eric, shaped by his harsh experiences, skeptical and hardened. Their friendship took a dramatic turn when they teamed up to rescue a Holocaust survivor named Gabriel Haller from Baron von Strucker and his Hydra goons. Up until now, the two friends hadn't let each other know that they were mutants. You should note at this point Eric didn't have his helmet, and yet Charles couldn't penetrate his mind. So it either means that Eric always had some form of protection against psychics like Charles, or that Charles's abilities were not very strong when it came to mutants, at least till this point. Anyway, this mission forced them to reveal their true powers to each other. Later, Eric realized that his views sharply contrasted with Xavier's. He knew he couldn't continue his friendship or partnership with his psychic friend, so he took Hydra's stash of Nazi gold and disappeared to embrace his journey as the master of magnetism. Losing another child? Well, sort of. After his stint in Haifa and still on a quest for justice, Eric used his powers for the noble cause of tracking down Nazi war criminals. But he was basically playing a double game here. He'd collaborate with Western intelligence agencies but handed the war criminals to the Mossad for trial in Israel. This delicate balance worked for a while, as his Western handlers seemed cool with it as long as the USSR wasn't involved. However, when Eric tried to hand over a Nazi named Hans Richter, the Western agency, not down with this particular handover, responded with force, killing Eric's girlfriend, Isabel, right before his eyes. Enraged, Magnus lashed out and killed his handlers from the agency. This was the breaking point. His remaining trust in humanity crumbled, and he finally embraced the persona of Magneto. Magneto then arrived in Brooklyn, New York, under the alias Michael Xavier. Here, he found a community of mutants blending into society. It was in Brooklyn that he met Cassandra Michaels, a mutant who crafted his first iconic costume. The vivid, striking outfit was a deliberate choice by Magneto to differentiate himself in a world increasingly filled with colorfully costumed heroes and villains. During a date with Cassandra, they were attacked by a monster from the underground. For a brief moment, Magneto toyed with the idea of playing the hero, but a perceived lack of gratitude from Cassandra pushed him away from that path. He realized his true calling lay elsewhere, far from the heroics he momentarily considered. Magneto's life also included a personal chapter that few knew about. He had an affair with a married woman named Susanna Dane, which resulted in a daughter, Lorna. Now, Lorna plays a very important role in Magneto's life, but we'll cross that bridge when we reach it. Susanna's husband, Arnold, discovered the affair while flying with Susanna and Lorna. The intense emotional turmoil triggered Lorna's latent mutant powers, which caused the plane crash that killed both Arnold and Susanna, and Lorna was left an orphan. Drawn to the crash site by the magnetic disturbance caused by Lorna, Magneto discovered his daughter's powers. However, believing she wasn't ready for the harsh realities of his world, he asked his associate, Mastermind, to alter her memories about the crash and their encounter from her mind. This left Lorna unaware of her true heritage and the immense power she possessed, much like her father. walking toward insanity. Years down the line, Magneto had in his possession the legendary helmet that was designed to block out telepathy. His mission was to conquer humanity and stop the oppression of mutants, positioning himself as the ultimate protector of mutant kind. He even built a space station, Asteroid M, as his base of operations and started putting together his crew, the original Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. One of his first recruits, Astra, wasn't exactly passionate about the mutant cause. She was more into Magneto himself. She didn't stick around long though, dipping out before the Brotherhood went public. Magneto, in his quest for strong mutants, ended up bringing twins Pietro and Wanda on board after saving them from an angry mob. Little did he know, these were the kids Magda had kept secret from him. Pietro was always looking for the exit, and Wanda wasn't cool with Magneto's extreme methods, but she felt indebted to him, and Pietro wouldn't leave his sister. At this point, Magneto was not in a good place mentally. The combination of constantly flexing his immense powers and the weight of his past had pushed him into a psychotic, manic state. On the anniversary of his liberation from Auschwitz, he had a tense meet-up with Charles Xavier, now Professor X and wheelchair-bound. Xavier tried to get Magneto to see that his actions were mirroring the Nazis' brutality. Magneto brushed him off, mocking Xavier's disability. Xavier hit back, saying he might have lost his legs, but not his heart, something Magneto couldn't claim. The encounter ended with both acknowledging their power to destroy each other, but Xavier was left hoping Magneto would come around. What Magneto didn't realize was that overusing his powers was messing with his head, making him increasingly unhinged. The more he pushed his abilities, the more his sanity took a hit, setting him on a path of ever-growing instability and extremism. Brotherhood and the X-Men. Magneto's first major fight with humanity came to place when he tried to take over the Cape Citadel missile base, but unfortunately for him, it was a bust thanks to Professor Xavier's original X-Men team. Not one to back down, he then managed to pull off a coup in Santo Marco and very conveniently crowned himself the big boss. He led his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, which now included Wanda and Pietro. Naturally, the X-Men weren't just going to sit at the back and watch these events unfold. They had to stop this anarchy. They stormed Santo Marco and freed it from Magneto's grip. In a twist of fate, Magneto kidnapped Angel, one of the X-Men, by luring the team to his space station, Asteroid M. Things got real up there, and in the heat of the battle, Scarlet Witch sabotaged Magneto's kill switch designed for the X-Men, which in turn became the cause of Asteroid M's destruction. In X-Men Volume 3, Magneto was at it again. This time, he clashed with the X-Men at Hammer Industries, but when a Sentinel showed up, Magneto and his crew didn't waste a single moment in escaping. Around the same time, this group, called the Evolutionaries, thought Magneto was the top dog for all mutant kind. They wanted his and the Brotherhood's help, which led to them kidnapping Emma Frost. Magneto took Frost to Xavier's school for gifted youngsters to use Cerebro, but things went sideways when Beast's device, meant to cut off cosmic ray access, accidentally killed two evolutionaries. With the situation getting out of hand, Cyclops, leader of the X-Men, stepped up and promised to protect mutant kind. This made the last surviving evolutionary rethink things. He peaced out, but not before wiping everyone's memory of their involvement and hinting at a possible return. In comics like Journey into Mystery and X-Men, Magneto tried to get some heavy hitters on his team. He aimed high, reaching out to Thor, the Thunder God, and Namor, the King of Atlantis, to join his Brotherhood. Both said a hard no. When he tried to sweet-talk Namor, things went further south. Magneto hijacked Namor's army for an attack, but Namor teamed up with the Fantastic Four and handed Magneto a good old defeat. Next up, in X-Men issue 7, Magneto set his sights on the Blob as a new recruit, but the Blob wasn't down for it. He peaced out after seeing how Magneto treated his crew. However, in the 9th and 10th issues of Amazing Adventures Volume 2, Magneto then clashed with the Inhumans. He tried to use Black Bolt in a raid on a government facility, but Black Bolt was just playing along and turned the tables with the Inhuman royal family to take Magneto down. In X-Men issue 11, Magneto and Toad got scooped up by this cosmic entity called the Stranger and were whisked off to his home planet for study. Meanwhile, Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, his estranged kids, joined a new Avengers lineup led by Captain America, and Magneto busted out of the Stranger's planet solo, leaving Toad behind. But freedom was short-lived. The Stranger had been tipped off by Professor X, so he recaptured Magneto. The Master of Magnetism somehow ended up back on Earth, courtesy of Dane Whitman. Still fixated on his mission, Magneto tried to force Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver back into the Brotherhood. He even rocked up at the United Nations, where he demanded a separate country for mutants. Quicksilver managed to alert the Avengers, who teamed up with the X-Men to take Magneto down again. Oh, and remember Toad, who'd been left behind? Well, Magneto got the boot from a helicopter by a fed-up Toad. Thought to be gone for good, Magneto narrowly escaped a watery grave, using his powers to tunnel through the earth. After a few setbacks, Magneto decided to lay low in the Savage Land. There, he went full mad scientist and even turned the locals into his loyal followers who were called the Savage Land Mutates. He even had them build a machine that would boost his powers. But as luck would have it, the X-Men were on his tail again, investigating Sauron's supposed suicide. They clashed with Magneto, wrecked his setup, and left him for dead in the ruins of his citadel. But hey, this is Magneto we're talking about. He doesn't go down that easily. Some weird radiation in the Savage Land brought him back. Round 2 with the X-Men went down, with Magneto trashing the X-Mansion and capturing them. He even got the Avengers in his clutches and planned to use some kidnapped scientists to create a mutant army. The plan got foiled by Vision, who took control of Piper and knocked Magneto out cold. Magneto's adventures didn't stop there. He stumbled upon some alien tech and records, courtesy of the mastermind Maelstrom. Using this, he created Alpha the Ultimate Mutant. But Alpha wasn't down for Magneto's games and turned him into a baby. Professor Xavier saw a chance for a fresh start for Magneto and had baby Magneto cared for by Dr. Moira McTaggart. She tried to rejig his genetics to help him handle his powers better mentally. But Magneto's baby days were cut short by the Shi'ar's Eric the Red, who aged him back up to a younger adult. Back in action, Magneto had a few run-ins with Xavier's new X-Men. He even tried to form a new brotherhood with Burner, Lifter, and the gang, but after they failed in capturing Mr. 1 and Mr. 2 and got beaten by Captain America, Magneto left their side. Magneto's next stop was Latveria, where he was seriously weirded out by the people's blind loyalty to Dr. Doom. So he did what he does best, attack Doom in his castle. But Doom took down Magneto and even subjected him to some mind control neurogas. In fact, Doom challenged Magneto to stop him from world domination. Magneto then dialed the Avengers to tell them about Doom's grand plans. Doom, not missing a beat, commanded the Avengers to take out Magneto, who noticed Beast was resisting the mind control, so he saved him and wiped the gas's effects. The two then teamed up with the Champions for some backup. After a bit of a misunderstanding and a scuffle, they filled in the Champions about Doom's scheme. The fight was in Washington, D.C., with Hulk thrown into the mix by Doom. But by now, Ghost Rider shook off Doom's control and joined Magneto and Beast. Magneto was close to defeating Doom, but Doom reversed Magneto's powers, forcing him to retreat. Later, Magneto played the hero and rescued the X-Men from Mesmero in his circus. Mesmero had the X-Men locked up by his robot, Nanny, while Magneto was busy messing with aerospace stuff in Australia and New Zealand. After some time, he started to reflect on his past. When Cyclops and Lee Forester stumbled upon his island base, Magneto was plotting to take over world governments to end the nuclear arms race. He even sank a Soviet sub called Leningrad and wrecked Varikino with a volcano. But after a near-fatal encounter with Sprite, a young mutant Jew, Magneto hit a moral crossroad and ditched his world conquest plans. At one point, Magneto found himself in a unique situation when Xavier and Moira McTaggart dropped by his Bermuda base for a chat. Xavier gave him a reality check. Both their dreams for mutant kind might not cut it for the future. He asked Magneto to open his mind, literally. Magneto was wary at first, but eventually caved. Xavier gave him a mental tour of various lives where Magneto would always end up failing. He also revealed that Moira was a mutant who could reset the timeline after dying. Xavier's pitch was that they keep failing on their own, but could succeed together. Magneto saw some sense in this and agreed to join forces with Xavier and Moira. One of their first moves was recruiting Mr. Sinister to gather a library of mutant genes. In return, Xavier and Magneto offered to steal some hard-to-get samples for Sinister, who was down for the plan. However, Xavier erased the meeting from Sinister's memory, so he'd only remember when they needed him. Magneto's path crossed with the X-Men again, after the discovery of 2 murdered mutant kids. He helped the X-Men fend off an attack by the Purifiers, a group hell-bent on wiping out mutants. They even had to get rough with the Purifiers for info, saving Kitty Pryde in the process. The fight continued at William Stryker's base, where Magneto helped rescue Cyclops and Storm. The drama peaked at Madison Square Garden, where Professor X was hooked to a machine set to kill all mutants. Magneto, immune to telepathy thanks to his helmet, distracted Xavier long enough for the X-Men to smash the machine. In a televised debate with Stryker, Cyclops defended the mutant cause. Stryker, losing it, tried to shoot Kitty, but was taken down by a cop. Back at the X-Mansion, Xavier almost joined Magneto's side, but Scott's faith in Xavier's dream made the Professor stay put. Magneto bounced and called them fools for not seeing the bigger picture. So basically, these are the instances that make us believe that Magneto is not entirely a villain. Whenever he's concerned, things are never entirely black or white. What I mean is there's always a bit of grey and anti-heroics in Magneto's actions. Secret Wars. After getting his space station back up and running, Magneto found himself in an obnoxiously wild cosmic event. He, along with a bunch of notorious bad guys like the Absorbing Man, Dr. Doom and the Molecule Man, plus the mighty Galactus, got pulled into this bizarre space-time region way out in the cosmos. Here, they weren't alone. Some costumed heroes joined the party too. As they were trying to figure out what was up, they watched a whole galaxy get wiped out, except for one star. Then, right before their eyes, a new planet, later dubbed Battleworld, came into existence around that lone star. Soon, things got even weirder. A rift opened, and this blinding light poured out. A voice boomed out of nowhere, saying,
"I am from beyond. Stay your enemies, and all your desires shall be yours."
That voice belonged to the Beyonder. Next thing they knew, everyone was teleported to Battleworld, which was basically a predator hunting ground. You know, a cosmic free-for-all. The villains were mostly keen on taking out the heroes or to snag whatever prize the Beyonder was dangling in front of them. It was an all-out secret war, with each side trying to outdo the other in a battle royale for the ages. This was no ordinary fight. It was a clash on a cosmic scale, with stakes as high as they could get. Magneto was right in the thick of it, using his powers and wits to navigate this interstellar battlefield, where alliances shifted like sand, and every move could mean the difference between triumph and defeat. On Battleworld, Magneto found himself pegged as the bad guy by the heroes. But instead of jumping into the fray, he played it smart. He stayed on the sidelines and set up his own base. This whole crazy situation got him thinking about the things he actually had in common with humans, which was a real head-scratcher for someone who'd always seen mutants as superior. But he couldn't stay in the sidelines for long and clashed with the heroes over their power supply and even kidnapped the Wasp. But he knew a threat when he saw one, and soon set his eyes on Galactus, who was trying to chow down on Battleworld itself. I mean, well, he is a planet eater, so you can't really blame him. When Professor X realized Galactus' plan, it sparked a galactic fight with the X-Men and the other heroes jumping into battle. Throughout this chaos, Magneto was mostly rolling with the X-Men. But then Dr. Doom siphoned off power from both Galactus and the Beyonder, and also killed all the heroes in one fell swoop. Fortunately, Mr. Fantastic brought everyone back to life. Once the Beyonder got his powers back, he and Doom vanished into thin air, and the heroes, including Magneto, returned to Earth. Magneto and Lee Forester. In New Mutants issue 21, Warlock crashed into Magneto's space station, Asteroid M, and sent him down to Earth. He splashed into the ocean, and just when things looked bleak, Cyclops X, Lee Forester, swooped in for the save. She took him to his old Bermuda Triangle base, where she patched him up and showed him some human kindness. Despite his usual humans ugh attitude, things got a bit steamy as Lee melted Magneto's icy heart, turning the savior into his lover. But reality hit Lee hard the next day as she was reminded of Magneto's not-so-angelic past, and she left him alone. Meanwhile, the government had passed the Mutant Registration Act. This law demanded that all mutants register and give up their rights. And quite obviously, Magneto was not going to take this too kindly. Magneto as the Headmaster. When the mighty Beyonder resurfaced, Magneto teamed up with the X-Men once more. Professor Xavier was laying low for mutant-hating thugs, and Magneto stepped in to fill the gap. He even went incognito and took the alias Michael Xavier to keep the law off his back. In a move that surprised everyone, Magneto played the peacemaker to stop Rachel Summers from killing a trigger-happy human. He wanted to preach to the mutant kind not to feed the stereotype that mutants are bad news. But peace never lasts long in Magneto's world. The Freedom Force came knocking, which forced Magneto to surrender and undergo trial at the World Court. His defense was led by old pal Gabrielle Haller, while Sir James Jaspers played the tough prosecutor. But the place became drama central as Fenris, the twin children of Baron von Strucker, crashed the party and almost took out Professor Xavier. As Xavier was knocking on death's door, the Shi'ar Majestrix, Lilandra Neramani, swooped in for a rescue. Xavier's dying wish was for Magneto to step up as headmaster of the school for gifted youngsters and mentor the new mutants. However, Rachel Summers, aka Phoenix, had a moment where she thought, why not just reset the whole universe to fix the Beyonder mess? She almost executed her plan by draining the life out of the X-Men and Starjammers. But Storm Soul had a heart-to-heart with her, which made Rachel rethink. Phoenix brought everyone back to life, and the entire event made Magneto question his own extreme methods for the greater good. While the X-Men were fixing up San Francisco post-Beyonder battle, the New Mutants got a literal reboot. The Beyonder wiped them out and brought them back. Now this reboot left the New Mutants a bit off their game. Some even lost their power skills, and as a result, they started to feel detached. Magneto started to lose his cool, getting all paranoid and angsty. Empath played with his head, convincing him to send the New Mutants to the Hellions, thinking the White Queen could help them out. But when Magneto realized he'd been played, he went into full rescue mode. The Avengers, thinking he was up to no good, jumped him. Thankfully, the New Mutants showed up to save the day. Magneto and Emma Frost then teamed up to help the kids heal from their Beyonder trauma. Quite bizarrely, Mojo turned the X-Men into X-Babies, which led to a fight with the New Mutants. Mutants. Eventually, they shook off their brainwashing and took down Mojo. Amidst all this, Magneto was offered a spot in the Hellfire Club. He walked in and realized X-Factor was actually the original X-Men in disguise. Confused and unsure, Magneto just left the place. When Mr. Sinister's Marauders went on a rampage against the Morlocks, the X-Men stepped in to stop the massacre. Magneto, meanwhile, got babysitting duty from Storm. He was asked to stay at the mansion, look after the New Mutants, and patch up the injured. Meanwhile, Colossus got roughed up by Riptide shurikens, but Magneto used his powers to fix him up, though the guy ended up temporarily paralyzed. While all this was going down, the New Mutants sneaked into the tunnels to lend a hand, just as Thor was lighting a massive funeral pyre for the fallen Morlocks. For a hot minute, everyone thought the New Mutants had died too. Surprisingly, on Storm's advice, Magneto joined the Hellfire Club as co-White King of the Inner Circle. This gave the X-Men an inside track to the Hellfire Club's secrets and the defense against any Marauder reruns. Magneto also gave the thumbs up to Havoc to join the X-Men. But of course, the drama had only begun. When Shadowcat was in deep trouble, Magneto went to Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four, hoping to use one of his gadgets to save her. But Mr. Fantastic was iffy about the risks and said no, even after the X-Men pleaded. Things got heated, and the X-Men clashed with the Fantastic Four. The Human Torch even scorched Storm's arm. However, Dr. Doom offered help. Since Storm was under serious pressure, she obliged. Thanks to the push from Franklin Richards, Dr. Doom and Mr. Fantastic put their heads together and managed to save Kitty. When Magneto found bits of his space station scattered over Earth, he ditched the X-Men to scavenge the tech in Kampuchea. But, like clockwork, the Avengers appeared to stop him. Just in time, the X-Men jumped in to help, only for the Super Soldiers and Crimson Dynamo to crash the party. Amidst the chaos, the X-Men got their hands on Magneto and made a slick exit. However, Magneto was only half done, so he left the X-Men again to grab his space station tech. Once he got it, he slipped back into his classic helmet. The Avengers showed up for round 2, but with the X-Men's backup, Magneto took his gear and destroyed what was left of Asteroid M. Next, the team hitched a ride on a Dutch freighter to Singapore, and the Super Soldiers caught up with them at sea. But Magneto started to feel like a magnet for trouble, so he split from X-Men once again. In Singapore, he found refuge with an underground mutant group. They wanted him to lead a rebellion against humans, but Magneto was like, nah, I've changed. Then soldiers barged in, guns blazing, and Magneto stepped up to save the day. Reuniting with the X-Men and Avengers, Magneto showed off his new toy, a helmet device that could tweak minds to erase mutant prejudice. His plan wasn't to rule, but to make peace. After testing it on Captain America and seeing Cap's clean bill of mutant friendliness, Magneto agreed to face the music in court. In Paris, with Gabrielle Haller defending him and Sir James Jaspers prosecuting, Magneto was staring down a guilty verdict. Worried his death might kickstart a mutant-human war, he used his helmet gizmo on Judge Alexandre Gilbert de Mortier, who suddenly decided to let Magneto walk free. Grey King. But in X-Men vs. Avengers issue 4, he destroyed the helmet and went back to running the Xavier School. He tried bonding with the students, especially Illyana Rasputin, who was dealing with major losses, namely her brother Colossus and best friend Shadowcat. Meanwhile, Magneto wasn't thrilled with the New Mutants' wild ways. A soccer game got too rough, which led Sunspot to accidentally concuss Cannonball. Sunspot found himself to be nothing less than a walking calamity and ran away with Warlock in tow. To ease the tension, Magneto suited up the New Mutants for a Hellfire Club shindig and brought in Dr. McTaggart to help run the school. Later, the New Mutants rescued Birdbrain, an animal-like creature, and after a mall mishap, Magneto almost handed him over to the authorities. Cypher chatted with Birdbrain and convinced Magneto to let him stay. Then, Sunspot and Warlock returned, but the other New Mutants were MIA. Magneto told the duo to stay put while he used Hellfire Club tech to find the gang. During his search, he watched X-Factor's battle with Apocalypse and saw the current X-Men seemingly die on TV. When the New Mutants returned, they revealed that Cypher was killed by the Animator. Magneto lost it. He locked down the school and forbade the kids from leaving or using their powers in his absence. He thought he was protecting them, but things got out of hand when Illyana, in her Dark Child form, confronted him. To make things worse, Doug Ramsey died, and it made Magneto hate humans more than ever. He fibbed to Doug's parents about a hunting accident. He was furious with Professor Xavier for leaving him in charge and started threatening the New Mutants to follow his rules or else. Things at the school were heating up, and not in a good way. Later, Sunspot, the rebel, returned and claimed that Magneto didn't own their powers. Magneto scolded him, but then Emma Frost called with news. Magma had been taken away. Magneto teamed up with the White Queen and the Hellfire Club's Inner Circle for a rescue mission, but they were unaware that the New Mutants had already saved Magma. Cannonball got a pass to see his girlfriend's gig and promised to keep his powers in check. Meanwhile, the New Mutants overheard Magneto chatting with the White Queen about using power neutralizers. That didn't sit well with the New Mutants, who dashed off to help Cannonball when a fight broke broke out at Lila Cheney's concert. Magneto, back in his classic helmet and red-purple suit, arrived at a Hellfire Club meeting. Sebastian Shaw, the big boss, wasn't happy about the New Mutants' wild behavior, but the White Queen had Magneto's back and stood up for him amidst the criticism. Meanwhile, Manhattan turned into Demon Central when a portal opened up in Times Square, and the Hellfire Club's inner circle, including Magneto, jumped into action. After shutting it down, they got an offer from the demon Nastir. Manhattan for them, the rest of the world for him. The New Mutants caught Magneto and the crew chatting with Nastir and totally lost faith in him. Kids, post-Demon Smackdown, Shaw got in Magneto's face about Illyana, which made the two bigwigs clash over mutant future plans, but the fight ended in a stalemate. Back at the school, Magneto and the Inner Circle rocked up just in time to save the New Mutants from Sabretooth. It turned out Mr. Sinister had trashed the mansion. Magneto was floored to find out Illyana had reverted to a kid to stop the demons. Additionally, because of Sunspot, a fight between the Inner Circle and the New Mutants broke out, in which Magneto went full metal and trapped the New Mutants in a giant metal ball. Shaw called out Magneto for losing the control the Hellfire Club brought him in for. The two squared off, with Magneto declaring he joined the X-Men, led the New Mutants, and infiltrated the Hellfire Club to prep for a human-mutant war. The New Mutants overheard everything. After Magneto beat Shaw, Shaw threatened to quit if Magneto stayed. The Inner Circle showed Shaw the door, and Magneto crowned himself Grey King, claiming both the Black and White King roles. Wanting a backup plan, Magneto fancied up a new Asteroid M. He left the New Mutants, telling Dr. McTaggart he'd play the bad guy again to keep the heat on him as the top mutant menace. Magneto confessed he couldn't fill Professor Xavier's shoes or follow his methods, admitting Xavier's way just wasn't his style. Acts of Vengeance. Magneto appeared next in the Savage Land, where he bumped into X-Man Rogue. They teamed up against Saladan, who was on a power trip after swiping magnetic abilities from Polaris and Magneto. Magneto didn't hold back and took Saladan down. After this, Rogue left the Savage Land upset and disillusioned because of Magneto's ways, and Magneto himself realized they were on different paths. With mutant safety getting dicey, Magneto started scouting for allies to shield mutants from humanity. In the Acts of Vengeance story arc, he joined heavy hitters like Dr. Doom, the Wizard, and the Mandarin. Then came a face-off with Red Skull. Yeah, the same Nazi war criminal with no regrets. Magneto dished out his own brand of justice and sealed Red Skull in a living tomb as payback for his crimes. Returned to the older ways. Fed up with constant battles, Magneto built Avalon, an orbital base for some peace and quiet. But even up there, he couldn't escape being a mutant icon. A group of fresh-faced mutants called the Acolytes tracked him down because they saw him as their leader. However, by now, Magneto has scaled back his ambitions. No more world domination dreams. He just wanted a safe spot for mutants. He tried making Asteroid M that sanctuary, but governments and the X-Men were ready to destroy his dreams. The X-Men were unsure of his intentions, so they confronted him, but this made him feel betrayed, and after a fight with Wolverine, he was left badly injured. However, he managed to run away from there, only to learn that Moira had tampered with him during his baby days. As should be expected, the man flipped. He ditched his truce with her and Xavier and went back to his old radical ways. He rallied the Acolytes and reignited his fight against humanity and the X-Men. The UN Security Council freaked out by Magneto's comeback and immediately rolled out the Magneto Protocols, a satellite network to mess with Earth's magnetic field and keep him grounded. Magneto responded with an electromagnetic pulse wave that fried electronics worldwide. Xavier and some X-Men then jetted to Avalon to face him. In the clash, Magneto yanked the adamantium from Wolverine's bones, which caused him major pain. It also left Xavier enraged, who shut down Magneto's mind. While out of commission, the Acolytes looked after Magneto on Avalon. Exodus stepped up and claimed to speak for Magneto, but when Holocaust wrecked Avalon, Magneto made it back to Earth with Colossus in an escape pod. Yep, Colossus was somehow back. The truth about the Eric Lensher identity. Next up in the Magneto saga, a guy with amnesia calling himself Joseph showed up. He had magnetic powers and looked like a younger Magneto. The X-Men thought he was a younger, nicer Magneto, because that sort of thing was common in superhero comics, so they brought him on board. Joseph started to believe he was actually Magneto, but the real Magneto reappeared and went full terror mode on humans. Turns out, Joseph was just a Magneto clone. Meanwhile, Sabra, a mutant Mossad agent and part of Xavier's underground, dug up some dirt. She found out that Magneto's Sinti Romani identity, Eric Lensher, was totally made up. She spilled the beans to Gabrielle Haller. Sabra was feeling utterly betrayed and declared her own personal vendetta against Magneto after accusing him of betraying humans, mutants, and their Jewish heritage. building Janosa. Meanwhile, Magneto took over the planet's magnetosphere from the North Pole, basically blackmailing the world into giving mutants their own nation. The UN handed over Janosa, an island with no real government, but the stunt nearly drained Magneto's powers. On Janosa, resistance was waiting. Magneto boosted his powers first with Fabian Cortez, then Polaris, and eventually took full control after a tussle with the Avengers and wrecking Carrion Cove. But Magneto wasn't done yet. He found a device near Carrion Cove that could supercharge his powers. Ignoring warnings from his supposed kids, Wanda and Pietro, he used it, regaining his electromagnetic mastery, but at a cost. It sent him off the deep end, making him psychotic and manic. The situation heated up when the legacy virus was cured, and Janosa swelled with thousands of newly healthy mutants. Magneto saw this as a chance to build an army. Jean Grey and her X-Men managed to hold him off, but not before Wolverine delivered a brutal blow, supposedly crippling Magneto. Recovering but now in a wheelchair, Magneto was cared for by Polaris. If you'll remember, she was the daughter he'd abandoned long ago, but Polaris had always been drawn to him. However, Polaris's DNA matched with her own, and discovered she was actually his biological daughter. Meanwhile, Janosa got hit by new mega-powerful Sentinels, and Magneto was still stuck in a wheelchair and hurting bad. It seemed like he died in the attack, but in reality, his loyal crew hid him in a shelter. He was down, but not out. Later, the X-Men stumbled upon what they thought were Magneto's final words amidst the ruins. These words sparked a wave of mutant supremacist vibes, and turned Magneto into a kind of Che Guevara figure for mutants. Magneto was right merch started popping up everywhere, even at the Xavier Institute. Meanwhile, this dude Zorn showed up in New York, causing chaos and pretending to be Magneto. As this was going about his business, the real Magneto was clawing his way out of the Janosian wreckage. When Xavier found him, Magneto had a blank spot in his memory, no clue about anything from the Sentinel attack to being rescued. With everyone thinking Magneto was gone for good because Wolverine had chopped off Zorn's head, Xavier and Magneto decided to join forces. They set out to rebuild Janosa, rekindling their old friendship along the way. House of M. In the House of M story arc, Scarlet Witch totally lost it after a reminder about her kids' deaths. She went berserk on the Avengers until Doctor Strange knocked her out. Magneto heard her psychic SOS and snatched her away to Janosa using a wormhole right before the Avengers could catch her. In Janosa, Wanda was more withdrawn and angry, and Magneto let only Xavier visit, hoping he could fix her shattered mind. Things got super intense when Magneto thought about putting Wanda down for the world's safety, given her reality warping powers going haywire. But Pietro convinced her to flip reality and create a world where they got everything they wanted. In this new reality, mutants were top dogs, and Magneto was the big boss of all mutants who ruled from Janosa. A group of heroes who remembered the real world thanks to Layla Miller went after Magneto, thinking he was behind the world's makeover. Layla managed to jog Magneto's memory too. When he realized Pietro had twisted reality in his name, Magneto crushed Pietro under a Sentinel. So, he killed his own son. Anyway, Wanda saw Magneto's harsh treatment of her brother, and fed up with his obsession over mutants over his own kids, she snapped. She reshaped reality again, saying, "No more mutants," and almost wiped out Earth's mutant population. If it weren't for Doctor Strange and Emma Frost, mutants would have been history. Losing and regaining his powers. After No More Mutants, Magneto was among the many who lost their powers. He was left in the ruins of Janosa, a shadow of his former self, and all he could do was watch from a distance as mutants faced extinction. And even the X-Men moved on, leaving him to his fate. When Quicksilver tried to restore mutant powers with the Inhumans' Terrigen Mist, Magneto slammed the plan and warned of its harmful effects on non-Inhumans. A bitter Quicksilver who craved for his father's approval lashed out and beat Magneto until his daughter Luna intervened. Magneto later revealed to the Inhumans about Quicksilver's misuse of their mist. The Collective, a mass of mutant energy, briefly re-empowered Magneto, but it was actually Zorn, the Magneto impersonator. Zorn argued that mutants needed the real Magneto back. Out of control, Magneto attacked the new Avengers and S.H.I.E.L.D., but in truth, he wanted them to end him. Inhuman S.H.I.E.L.D. agent Daisy Johnson finally took him down. Later, Magneto was the subject of a massive manhunt by the US government, the Morlocks, and the X-Men. Xavier couldn't find him with Cerebro. However, Magneto was seen paying respects at a graveyard at the tombstone of a former henchman. The Morlocks, with their own agenda, used Magneto's name to justify their actions. On the other hand, Magneto, still depowered, spoke to a crippled Morlock and hinted that his powers were gone. Skids later found him in a cemetery and handed him a book from Mask, claiming it predicted the future of mutants and that Magneto was still one of them. Magneto, supposedly at Exodus's request, helped mend Xavier's broken psyche, Claiming powerlessness, he reminisced about old times with Omega Sentinel. Determined to get his powers back, Magneto hit up the High Evolutionary, a guy known for his next-level science. The Evolutionary agreed to help and forged up a plan involving the Dreaming Celestial. He built Magneto a suit that mimicked his old powers. Magneto used this to stir up trouble and reactivated some old Sentinels to crash a mutant quiche event in San Francisco. The suit got wrecked in the skirmish, but they got what they needed from the Celestial and escaped. Next, the High Evolutionary put Magneto through a super risky tech procedure while analyzing the Dreaming Celestial stuff, and before you know it, Magneto's powers were back. But the process was so intense it trashed the Evolutionary's gear, so no reversing the decimation for anyone else. After a fruitless space trip looking for more decimation fixes, Magneto learned the X-Men had gathered the remaining mutants on the ruins of Asteroid M. He decided it was time to head back to Earth and see what was up. Saving Pride. After Dr. Yuriko Takiguchi's funeral on Utopia, which was the new name for Asteroid M, Magneto showed up at his old stomping grounds. He surprised everyone by saying he came in peace and wanted a word with Cyclops. Professor Xavier wasn't buying it and hit Magneto with a mental attack. Magneto, however, didn't retaliate. Instead, he knelt down, sticking to his peaceful spiel. Cyclops told Xavier to back off and decided to hear Magneto out, though he kept Psylocke on standby just in case. Magneto told Cyclops he admired him for doing what he and Xavier never could, bringing mutant kind together. He admitted he'd lost hope for mutant kind's future until Cyclops filled him in about Hope Summers, the so-called mutant messiah, being alive and kicking. Still, the X-Men were wary of Magneto. To win their trust, he pulled off a major rescue mission and brought Kitty Pryde back to Earth. She was stuck in a space bullet, and Magneto dragged it back, freeing her. This Herculean effort knocked him into a coma. When Bastion attacked the X-Men, Magneto woke up and jumped into the fray, protecting Utopia's residents from the Nimrods. Magneto cleans his image. By now, Magneto had become an infamous mutant revolutionary and got a nudge from Cyclops to clean up his image now that he was on Utopia. Kate Kildare, a PR whiz for the superhuman crowd, suggested a wardrobe update to white and a dual strategy to get the public both loving and fearing him. Initially, Magneto wasn't keen on either idea, but then an earthquake threatened San Francisco and Magneto stepped up big time. He used his powers to keep the city's buildings and vehicles steady, calming the quake's tremors and basically saved a bunch of lives. San Francisco started seeing him in a new light after that. Post-Cyclops and Wolverine split, Magneto sided with Cyclops and joined his extinction team. Things got dicey when footage popped up showing Magneto killing some anti-mutant activists, but he had a rock-solid alibi. He was miles away with Cyclops. Captain America and Iron Man called them in to talk it out, and Cyclops had Magneto's back, giving him a shot to clear his name. Turned out the real bad guy was Joseph, Magneto's clone, who was resurrected by Astra and leading a new Brotherhood of evil mutants. Joseph, craving the fear Magneto's name used to inspire, teamed up with anti-mutant guy Christopher Bach to smear Magneto's rep. Magneto wasn't having it. He confronted Astra, forcing her to spill Joseph's plan to attack a pro-humanity rally. Magneto swooped in just in time and stopped Joseph to save the crowd. He wiped out all the clones and put Joseph out of commission, sending him to the X-Brig. In the chaos, though, Christopher Bach and his crew met their end, and Magneto played it cool, acting clueless about their fate. Avengers vs. X-Men. When the whole Phoenix Force drama came to Earth, Magneto went with his X-Men crew against the Avengers. Things got real when the Avengers crashed Utopia, which led to a space battle between Magneto and Iron Man. Magneto, who was pulling power from a distant planet, got sidetracked by the Phoenix wrecking that planet, which gave Iron Man the upper hand. The X-Men played it smart by faking a surrender before teleporting out. Magneto hid in a safe house with Storm and Psylocke, while Cyclops, Emma Frost and others took the fight to the moon. Iron Man tried to zap the Phoenix Force, but it split into 5 parts, each taking up residence in an X-Man. These Phoenix 5 started fixing Earth's problems and created a global paradise. The Avengers, though, weren't sold on this and kept up their resistance. The tide turned when Namor, one of the Phoenix 5, lost his chunk of Phoenix power after the Avengers took him down. Things got further messy when Colossus and Magic, also Phoenix-powered, knocked each other out. This left Cyclops and Emma with all the Phoenix powers, and they started going off the rails. Magneto tried talking Emma down, but she wasn't having it. Desperate, he contacted Professor X for help. The Avengers, X-Men and Xavier teamed up to tackle the Phoenix problem. Magneto fought in the final clash, but when Cyclops became the full-on Dark Phoenix, Magneto got KO'd. Hope Summers and Wanda eventually brought Cyclops down, with Hope using the Phoenix to kickstart mutant powers worldwide. After the dust settled, Magneto was on the run, but Abigail Brand helped keep him off the radar. He touched base with Cyclops in jail, but didn't bust him out as Cyclops wasn't keen on it. Magneto caught up with Magic and Danger, left Colossus alone because he was dealing with heavy stuff, and tipped off Storm about his location. Later, Cyclops called for a breakout. Magneto, Magic and Danger pulled it off, and they set off to protect mutant kind. Post-Avengers vs. X-Men, Magneto, Cyclops and Magic got busy freeing mutants who'd been locked up left and right. They were all about giving these mutants a hand with their powers and roping them into their growing rebellion. Things got a bit wobbly when they tried to spring Emma Frost. Both Magneto and Cyclops found their powers glitching. With Emma on board, they started a new school for mutants, setting up shop in the old Weapon X facility. But peace was short-lived as Sentinels started giving them grief. Magneto, always one to play the long game, went undercover in S.H.I.E.L.D. and posed as an informant. He was on a mission to figure out if S.H.I.E.L.D. was behind these Sentinel attacks. Axis. After parting ways with Cyclops' X-Men, Magneto went solo and spent time using his smarts and contacts to take down those committing anti-mutant hate crimes. On one of his missions, he busted some mutant growth hormone traffickers and caught the scientist to tweak the MGH formula, boosting his powers temporarily. He stumbled upon Red Skull, who was powered up with Charles Xavier's telepathic abilities and had turned Janosa into a mutant concentration camp. He tried to sneak in and take Skull down, but got caught by Skull's goons, the S-Men. Luckily, some mutant members of the Avengers Unity Division, who were also captives, helped him escape. Magneto managed to kill the Red Skull, but this only unleashed the Red Onslaught. The Avengers and X-Men teamed up against the Red Onslaught, who unleashed Sentinels created by a mind-controlled Tony Stark, specifically designed to fight superheroes, except Magneto, since Stark didn't see him as a hero. As things looked grim, Magneto bailed to recruit a villain squad to beat the Sentinels and the Red Skull. To stop the Red Onslaught, Scarlet Witch and Dr. Doom cast a spell that flipped everyone's moral compass on the island, including Magneto's. During a confrontation with Scarlet Witch, who was out for Doom's blood, Magneto discovered he wasn't affected by a bloodline-targeted spell, revealing he wasn't actually related to her or Quicksilver. After Doom and Dr. Voodoo cast a reverse spell, Magneto got back to his usual self. Post-World War hate, Magneto led a group of mutant refugees in Janosa, survivors of the Red Skull's camps. He got S.H.I.E.L.D.'s attention, surrendered, then trashed their helicarrier from the inside and wiped their mutant files. Namor tipped off Magneto about the incursions, universe-smashing events. Magneto, ready to do anything to stop them, prepped to sacrifice himself. He boosted his powers, even taking Polaris' abilities to push away the colliding world. His plan fell through, losing control of the immense power and disintegrating. The incursion went on, leading to the universe's reset. Uncanny X-Men. After the universe hit the reset button, bringing everyone back to life with no memory of their temporary checkout, Magneto found himself in a bit of a funk during the M-Pox crisis. The fire inside him was flickering out, and he wandered the wilds, hunting for a reason to keep the fight alive. That reason literally fell from the sky when Archangel crashed down with his last words, "Ensure mutants survive." This was the wake-up call Magneto needed, which reignited his purpose. He rallied a new squad of X-Men, the kind ready to play hardball for mutant survival. But as these things go, Magneto's operation started unraveling. His teammates began to drift away, each following their own path. During a scrap between the X-Men and the Inhumans, Magneto secretly teamed up with Emma Frost. But Psylocke, the first to bail on his team, came back with an agenda to take Magneto down, promising to stop him if he ever steered mutant kind toward darkness. She did just that, leaving Magneto for dead in the Savage Land. But luck was on his side. Exodus found him, and Elixir brought him back from the brink. Gift of the Red Skull. Magneto resurfaced and got in touch with Jean Grey. He pitched a secret alliance with her and the other time-displaced X-Men. Their goal was to uphold Xavier's vision of humans and mutants living together in harmony. Magneto set up his base on the island nation of Madripoor, where he got an interesting offer from Captain America, altered by a cosmic cube. Cap proposed a deal, a separate sovereign country for mutants in exchange for Magneto staying out of Hydra's takeover of the USA. To show he meant business, Cap even handed over the Red Skull's head. Magneto, albeit reluctantly, agreed to this devil's deal. From his Madripoor hideout, Magneto kept the peace in the mutants' new nation, Mutant. But things went south when Emma Frost, trying to use a cosmic cube fragment as a bargaining chip with Hydra, got shut down by Rogers. Magneto didn't take this lying down and launched a full-scale attack on Hydra, which coincidentally aided a rebel group called the Underground in their fight against Hydra's rule. Then came a global-scale challenge. A cabal led by Emma Frost, Havoc, Bastion, and Miss Sinister wanted to make mutants the top dogs using using a virus named Mothervine. With most young X-Men off in space, Magneto's resources were stretched. Luckily, Polaris rallied a makeshift X-Men team to help out. When Mothervine was unleashed, Magneto had to make a tough call and eliminate some Mothervine-controlled mutants in self-defense. This pushed him over the edge, emotionally. After the virus was neutralized, Magneto promised to push his mutant agenda harder than ever and hunt down those who made him act against his own. Leaving the young X-Men behind, Magneto started anew. He established a new version of Asteroid M, creating a fresh iteration of the Brotherhood. This time, he was more determined than ever to advance the mutant cause, no matter the cost. His experiences had hardened him, setting him on a path to fiercely protect mutants from any threats and ready to confront anyone who stood in his way. Nate Gray and Magneto. In Nate Gray's LifeSeed-crafted reality, where Earth was all mutant and relationships were a big no-no, Magneto found himself on the X-Men squad. Living solo but in the same area as his teammates, Magneto and the crew were the go-to responders for global issues, like wildfires and guarding mutant incubation spots. Things got heated when they clashed with Murshid Ensabarner and his extracts, challenging the state's mantra of identity, harmony, autonomy. During a fight with the extracts, Magneto, alongside Storm and X-23, started getting flashes of their actual reality. Magneto had his own trip when he saw illusions of Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, his supposed kids, in a crack in his house's wall. Storm caught him having an emotional moment over these visions. After a mission in the Bahamas, Storm hit up Magneto to chat about these memory flashes. They took their talk to the middle of a storm for some psychic privacy, mulling over their memories and what they meant about the resolution, the event that turned everyone into mutants. They couldn't settle on what to do next, but then X-Man, Nate Gray himself, interrupted and showed them another fissure in Colorado. This one gave more proof that their world was an illusion. Both Magneto and Storm lost it and tried to confront Nate, but he snapped them back to their homes and wiped their memories clean, just like that. Later, during Xavier Day celebrations, things went sideways with the extracts crashing the party. Jean had to step in with her telepathy to disperse the crowd, with Magneto right there to help. However, Magneto and a few X-Men came together to investigate the murder of Manita. Magneto pushed for the group to handle this info internally and logically before they even thought about confronting Nate about the whole setup. Krakoa. After Professor Xavier came back into the picture, he teamed up with Magneto and Moira McTaggart to kickstart a new chapter for mutants. They founded Krakoa, an island nation which all mutants could call home, no matter their past. To get the world on board, they offered miracle cures for various diseases, courtesy of Krakoa's unique flora. Magneto, along with Esme and Sophie Cuckoo, rolled out the welcome mat for a bunch of international big shots, giving them a tour of Krakoa and laying down the law about how this mutant nation would roll with humanity. But it wasn't all meat and greets. Magneto and Xavier got wind of the Orcus Forge, a space station creating a mother mold, which was a big threat as it could lead to the creation of Nimrod, a mutant hunting nightmare. They sent Cyclops and a team to take it out, and they nailed it by blowing up the mother mold. Meanwhile, Magneto, alongside Xavier and Wolverine, faced some dilemma when mutants who had been enemies, including Apocalypse, turned up. Apocalypse had some history with Krakoa and agreed to abide by Krakoa's laws and work for the mutant cause, solidifying Krakoa's status as a mutant haven. Magneto kills his daughter. Post-tournament, and with the arrival of Arakko, Krakoa's other half on Earth, the mutant community had a bit of a situation. Arakko was teeming with mutants, and their warlike vibe didn't really gel with Krakoa's more peaceful approach. Xavier and Magneto were left scratching their heads over this, and they met with Ishka the Unbeaten from Arakko to brainstorm some coexistence strategies. Magneto came up with an idea to terraform Mars and make it the new crib for the Arakko. This would not only sort out the Arakko-Earth culture clash, but also give mutants a leg up in space politics. He rallied a team of Omega-level mutants from both Krakoa and Arakko, and they actually managed to transform Mars and relocate Arakko there. This was the highlight of the Hellfire Gala, a swanky mutant-human bash. Later, Magneto had a heart-to-heart with Wanda Maximoff. Despite their complicated history, he affirmed he'd always be her dad. However, Wanda wanted to cast a spell allowing for the resurrection of mutants who had died before Cerebro backups. The catch was that she needed to die and be resurrected herself, and she asked Magneto to do the deed. Reluctantly, Magneto agreed to her plan. Naturally, Magneto became suspect number one in Wanda's murder. He got into a few scraps trying to stall for time while waiting for Wanda's resurrection, and resurrect she did, though initially without most of her memories. Krakoa then faced a new threat, 3 unstoppable kaiju, conjured by Wanda's subconscious. Eventually, Wanda's spirit found its way back, her memories were restored, and the kaiju menace ended. True to her word, she cast her spell, adding a whopping 20 million mutants to Krakoa's resurrection queue. Death. After the whole debacle with Moira vanishing and her eventual double cross, Magneto decided to hang up his hat with the Council of Krakoa and live in Arakko. There, he got into a scrap with Tarn of Arako's Great Ring and took him out, which earned him Tarn's Seat of Loss. But the Iraqi were wary about Krakoans serving on the Great Ring, especially since Krakoans had those resurrection protocols. To show that he was playing by Arako's rules, Magneto trashed his own Cerebro backups, basically saying he was cool with not coming back if he died. Things went from 0 to 100 when the Eternals, led by Prime Eternal Droog, decided to rough up the mutants. Droog let loose the Eternal Uranus on Arako, which caused chaos and prevented Arako from helping Krakoa. The Great Ring tried to hold their ground but got overpowered. Uranus went full beast mode and ripped out Magneto's heart. Somehow, Magneto kept himself alive using his powers to keep his blood flowing, but he was barely hanging on. Storm, fresh from space, jumped into the fray alongside Magneto in the Great Ring. They finally took down Uranus and his killer machines. Back on Earth, Droog wasn't done and unleashed Uranus again. Iron Man teamed up with Arako to take him down, and even built a fancy transporter for the job. Before heading out, Magneto tasked Legion with protecting Arako. The showdown with Uranus was intense, but they managed to turn his own tech against him. In the aftermath, Magneto, on the brink of death, asked Storm to look after Charles. Even the cosmic entity Progenitor was touched by this and appeared as Magneto's lost daughter Anya to bid him farewell. Magneto's passing hit hard for Storm, Charles, and Legion. Storm stepped down from her own seat and took Magneto's place on the Seat of Loss, continuing his legacy. So that was all about Magneto in the comics, but of course, how could we possibly leave his movies behind? Magneto in movies. Magneto's journey in the X-Men film series is truly wild and packed with drama, twists, and a whole lot of mutant action. Played by Ian McKellen and later Michael Fassbender, he's still the master of magnetism with a complex past and a fierce desire for mutant supremacy, born from his dark experiences in a World War II concentration camp. Even here, he's the leader of the Brotherhood of Mutants, which includes Mystique, Sabretooth, and Toad. In the original X-Men movie, Magneto has this grand scheme of using a machine that turns people into mutants during a UN summit. Then in X2, X-Men United, he's stuck in a plastic prison until Mystique helps him break free. He escapes and fights back using his helmet to block psychic attacks. X-Men The Last Stand shows Magneto teaming up with Xavier to help a young Jean Grey. Later, he's battling the introduction of a mutant cure, which he ends up getting hit with, seemingly losing his powers. X-Men First Class takes us back to Magneto's early days. Fassbender's younger Magneto teams up with Charles Xavier to form the original X-Men. He starts as a good guy, but ends up forming the Brotherhood after offing the villain Sebastian Shaw. The Wolverine features a cameo where an older Magneto recruits Wolverine. X-Men Days of Future Past brings together both McKellen and Fassbender as older and younger Magneto. Here, he's part of a desperate plan to change a dystopian future ruled by Sentinels. The younger Magneto gets busted out of a plastic prison and briefly teams up with the X-Men before going rogue again. In X-Men Apocalypse, Fassbender's Magneto loses his family and joins Apocalypse as one of his horsemen with a massive power boost. He almost destroys the world but is eventually swayed to fight against Apocalypse. Finally, in Dark Phoenix, Fassbender's Magneto now leads the mutant haven called Janosa, but he gets dragged back into conflict when Beast seeks his help to avenge Mystique's death caused by Jean Grey's Phoenix powers.
You spoke of creating an alternate future in which mutants would rule, as I have always dreamed.
Magneto in animated shows. Magneto's been all over the animation scene, from classic shows to modern hits, and he's always managed to bring his magnetic personality. In the Fantastic Four series, he has a memorable episode where Mr. Fantastic outsmarts him with a wooden gun. Then there's the 1981 Spider-Man cartoon where Magneto, voiced by Michael Rye, rocks up as the major bad guy. He tries to hold the world hostage with a communication blackout, but gets outplayed by Spidey, who uses a microwave relay to turn Magneto's powers against him. In Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, Magneto, still voiced by Rye, tries to free his Brotherhood of Evil Mutants by taking a bunch of prison wardens hostage. Unfortunately for him, Spider-Man, Iceman and Firestar are there, and they manage to zap his powers, leaving him KO'd. Pride of the X-Men gives us a more traditional Magneto, leading the Brotherhood in a plot to wipe out humanity. Earl Bowen brings him to life this time, capturing that classic Magneto style and vibe. X-Men, the animated series, features Magneto as a complex bad guy, voiced by David Hemblin. He has a tragic backstory and a love-hate relationship with Xavier. In X-Men Evolution, voiced by Christopher Judge, Magneto is the shadowy figure pulling strings behind the scenes, always trying to recruit more mutants for his cause against humanity. Wolverine and the X-Men show Magneto as the ruler of Janosa, offering refuge to mutants but still scheming against the X-Men. Tom Kane lends his voice to this vision. The Superhero Squad show features Magneto, voiced by Maurice LaMarche, as part of Doctor Doom's crew. trying to get his kids to carry on his legacy. Lastly, in Iron Man Armored Adventures, voiced by Ron Halder, Magneto targets a mutant girl, clashing with Iron Man and War Machine in his quest against humanity. Throughout these stories, be it comics, movies or cartoons, Magneto remains a compelling character, whether he's a villain, an anti-hero or somewhere in between. He's got the magnetic charm and the power to match, which help him remain a gem of a character.
And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.